Pride event hosted by Disabled People's International Korea and Queensland Advocacy for Inclusion. My name is Ellie Demarchelier. I'm a disability rights campaigner in Australia and proud to be supported by QAI to attend this event. Today we're exploring personal assistance schemes for people with disabilities. We'll be comparing two groundbreaking schemes, Australia's National Disability Insurance Scheme and South Korea's emerging personal support budget plan. Both represent powerful shifts from the medical model to the social model of disability, putting choice and control directly in the hands of people with disabilities. Over the next 75 minutes, we'll examine these two systems, what's working, what challenges remain, and how can we learn from each other's experiences to build more inclusive communities. So let this great conversation begin. And it's going to begin with a speech by me. So let me just turn over my piece of paper. Distinguished delegates from South Korea, fellow advocates and colleagues, it's an honour to speak with you today about what has to be my favourite topic in the world, Australia's National Disability Insurance Scheme, the NDIS. As South Korea prepares to embark on implementing your own version of this transformative system, I want to share with you the deeply human story of how Australia moved from one of the worst disability support systems in the developed world to creating what our former Prime Minister Julia Gillard called the greatest change to Australian social policy in a generation. To understand the NDIS, you must first understand what came before it. Imagine a country where your access to disability support depended entirely on which state you lived in, what caused your disability, and whether bureaucrats deemed you worthy of Russian services. That was Australia before 2013. We had 8 different state and territory systems, each with different eligibility criteria, different services, and different levels of funding. The Productivity Commission reported that the current system was underfunded, unfair, fragmented, and inefficient. A person with a spinal cord injury from a car accident might receive comprehensive support through insurance schemes, while someone with cerebral palsy received virtually nothing. For families, this meant devastating choices. Parents would move states seeking better services. Some divorced on paper so one parent could qualify for single parent support. Others faced financial ruin paying privately for basic equipment and therapies. The transformation began with visionaries who refused to accept this reality. Bruce Bonahady, whose sons have disabilities, understood that he had to stop thinking about disability policy as welfare and instead think of it as risk and insurance and investment. Working with actuary John Walsh, himself a quadriplegic, they calculated that maintaining the status quo would actually cost more than creating a comprehensive national scheme. Their breakthrough insight was revolutionary. Disability is a universal risk. Anyone can be born with disability or acquire it through accident or illness. Therefore, the entire community should share the cost of supporting disabled people, just as we share the cost of universal health care through Medicare. What happened next was extraordinary. The Every Australian Counts campaign was launched on Australia Day 2011. Just 2 years later, the NDIS started. But this campaign was not driven by politicians. It was a grassroots campaign that became one of Australia's most successful advocacy campaigns. Every Australian Counts brought together traditionally competing groups, disability service providers, advocacy organisations and carers, of course people with disability leading the way, behind a single vision. Their unity became a powerful symbol of resolve. The real power came from ordinary Australians sharing their stories. Disability events sprang up across the country. Morning teas where families shared their experiences over cups of tea and homemade cakes. These events were accessible, inclusive, and allowed people who couldn't attend usual rallies to participate meaningfully. The scale was unprecedented. Supporters sent 1,600 emails and made 550 phone calls to every single federal MP in Australia. Most powerfully, the campaign gave disabled people and their families their voice back. For decades, they'd been told to accept crumbs. Now they were demanding their rights as citizens. The results speak for themselves. Politicians who had ignored disability issues suddenly championed the NDIS. Prime Minister Julia Gillard and opposition leader Tony Abbott supported a 0.5% rise in the Medicare levy, an extraordinary bipartisan commitment that would have been unthinkable without grassroots pressure. Prime Minister Julia Gillard said, "Disability can affect any of us, and therefore it affects all of us. The consequences of disability, isolation, poverty, loss of dignity, stress, hopelessness, and fear of the future can be avoided. The National Disability Insurance Scheme is the greatest change to Australian social policy in a generation." Opposition leader Tony Abbott, known for opposing government spending, told disability advocate Rhonda Galbally, "Normally I'm Mr. No, but on this occasion I'm Mr. Yes." The Act fundamentally reimagined disability support as social insurance, not welfare. The NDIS broke every convention of traditional disability services. Firstly, it's insurance, not welfare. Using insurance principles, considering needs over a lifetime, investing early to reduce long-term costs, and maximise independence. Secondly, it's individual, not system-centred, creating individualised plans with funding that follows the person, not the service provider. Thirdly, it's based around the idea of choice and control. Participants choose their own services. This market-based approach incentivises quality and innovation. Finally, there's national consistency. One scheme, one set of eligibility criteria, portable across all states and territories. The rollout was deliberately gradual from 2013 to 2020, starting with trial sites and building to full national coverage. By 2020, every Australian with significant permanent disability under 65 could access the scheme. Today, the NDIS supports over 700,000 Australians with disability. The scheme has fundamentally shifted power from systems to people. Participants report unprecedented choice and control over their lives. A 2021 report estimated that for every dollar spent on the NDIS, there was a return of investment of $2.25. We must be honest about the NDIS's imperfections. Implementation has been challenging, with issues around plan adequacy, administrative complexity, market development in rural areas, and interface challenges with other systems. My colleague Tom is going to definitely address more of that in the lessons we've learnt from the NDIS. It is clear that the NDIS has been transformative for many Australians with disability, but significant concerns remain. Reforms are ongoing, and it is essential that any reforms are disability-led and focus on ensuring people with disability get the support they need. The NDIS represents a fundamental shift in how Australia sees disability, from charity to rights, from segregation to inclusion, from burden to investment. The scheme embodies Article 19 of the CRPD, the right to live independently and be included in the community. It gives practical effect to nothing about us without us by putting disabled people in control of their own supports. As we gather at COSP 18, the NDIS stands as proof that transformative change is possible. It shows that societies can choose to invest in inclusion over exclusion, dignity over dependence. South Korea has the opportunity to build on our experience while adapting to your unique context, culture, and needs. What unites us is the belief that every person with disability deserves the opportunity to live their best life, contribute to their community, and be valued as equal citizens. The NDIS isn't perfect, but it's progress. And progress, once started, builds its own momentum. Your journey begins now. Build it well, with disabled people leading the way, and you'll create more than a service system. You'll create a more just society. Thank you. I now have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Kim Young-wook. He is the Secretary General of Disabled People's International Korea. He is responsible for communication with government officials and the international community to organisation of persons with disabilities. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Young-wook Kim, the Secretary General of DPI Korea. This side event co-hosts OPDs, and I'm here today as substitute for someone who cannot attend it first. First of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea and Permanent Mission of the Republic of Korea to the United Nations and related officials for their great interest and cooperation in making it possible for this side event to be held here at the UN headquarters. Now, the Minister of Health and Welfare officer who was supposed to attend this event to give a congratulatory address and make a presentation, but she is unfortunately unable to attend due to tight and urgent official schedule. So I read the congratulatory address on behalf, firstly. Okay. Thank you for joining this side event today to learn about and share insight on Australia and the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which is globally recognized as a leading example in disability policy. Today, the Korea have gathered to discuss, to share the challenge of the transitioning welfare service toward a system that is based on autonomy and a choice for persons with disabilities. Korea is currently piloting a personal budget for persons with disabilities. The initiative shift away from a uniform, top-down approach and promotes a person-centered model, allowing individuals to purchase and select a service based on their own needs and preference. To ensure its success, the government, academia, and the disability community are working in close collaboration and dialogue. In accordance with the recommendations of a UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, we are striving to strengthen a system that upholds the right of persons with disabilities to make decisions for themselves. I hope today's side event featuring Australia's NDIS will serve as a valuable opportunity for us to reflect on how such model could be applied in our own national context. Thank you. So now, I just speech, but first of all, one thing I mentioned, I would like to tell you advance in the topic today, the progress and vision of the Korean government personal budget system was prepared by the DPI Korea based on the government data on date. So let's get started. Distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends, thank you for opportunity to speak at this important side event of the Conference of State Parties to the CRPD. Today, I'd like to share with you how Korea is transforming its disability support system through the development of an individual budget model, a major step toward person-centered, right-based support. Korea's previous disability service was heavily provider-centered and standardized, often relying on the grading system that classified people with disabilities based on severity, which unfortunately limited individual choice and autonomy. Recognizing the limitation of this model and its alignment with the CRPD, the Korean government abolished the grading system in 2019, which became a turning point in our effort to design more inclusive and personalized service. Still, removing the grading system alone was not enough. We need a new way to allocate resource, one that genuinely empowers persons with disabilities to decide their own goals and direct their own lives. In this journey, we close studies international models such as Australia's NDIS, which provide valuable insight into how individualized plans, flexible funding, and support coordination can work in practice. Rather than directly importing the model, Korea chose to develop its own budget, carefully tailored to our unique legal, administrative, and social landscape. Since 2022, we have been conducting pilot programs in several cities, targeting primarily persons with a severe disability who voluntarily participate in this new system. Each participant works with a trained support coordinator to develop a personalized support plan that reflects their actual needs, daily routines, and life goals. Based on that plan, the government allocated an individual budget, which the person can use to select a service that best suits them, whether for person assistance, rehabilitation, community engagement, or independent living. Supporting coordinator play a critical role not only in planning stage, but also in helping individuals navigate service options, manage their budgets, and monitor outcomes. To ensure transparency and user friendliness, Korea is also building a digital platform that will allow individuals to track their budget, find a service provider, and receive personalized information in real time. This change marks a paradigm shift from a system that asked what services are available to one that now asks what support do you need to live the life you choose. We have already seen positive outcomes. Participants report greater satisfaction, more control over their daily lives, and better alignment of service with their real needs. Our vision is to expand the individual budgeting model nationwide by 2025 this year, and to include a broader range of disabilities, including moderate and invisible impairment. At the same time, we are aware of challenges ahead, such as ensuring fair and adequate funding, addressing regional service gaps, and building a sustainable workplace of qualified support coordinators. Another challenge is the integration of the multiple existing systems, such as long-term care, activity support, and other welfare service, into a more coherent and streamlined structure. But these are just administrative tasks. They are opportunity to uphold the human rights of persons with disabilities, especially the right to live independently and be included in the community, as affirmed in Article 19 of the CRPD. Importantly, persons with a disability are not simply recipients of this reform. They are partners and co-designers. They have been involved in policy councils, evaluation committees, and pilot planning, ensuring that their voices shape the design, implementation, and improvement of a system. Korea's experience shows that meaningful reform can only happen when persons with disabilities are at the center, not only in principle, but in practice. And while we are still in the early stage, we believe that our approach that gradual, inclusive, and locally adapted offers a useful model for other countries, also seeking to move toward person-centered, community-based support. We continue this journey. We hope to learn from Australia NDIS experience as well. And we welcome international collaboration and dialogue to build a future where all persons with a disability can live with dignity, choice, and inclusion. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. I now have the pleasure to invite my colleague Tom Dixon to speak. Tom is a visually impaired lawyer and disability rights advocate at QAI and is deeply committed to disability justice. Tom brings both lived experience and legal expertise to his work, representing clients before the Mental Health Review Tribunal and contributing to policy reform. He also sits on the Queensland Law Society's Children's Law Committee and is passionate about advancing the rights of disabled people in regional areas. I'll hand over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Ellie. And it's the opportunity to collaborate on such an important side event today. The National Disability Insurance Scheme was established in 2013 following the grassroots Every Australian Counts campaign in 2010. The campaign involved people with disabilities, their families and carers. In 2020, the national NDIS rollout was completed. More than 700,000 people in Australia now receive disability support through the NDIS. In the space of a decade, the NDIS went from an idea to changing lives for the better. The realities faced by people with disability were moved from the political margins to become the core business of the Australian government and a headline issue in national affairs. The introduction of the NDIS embedded Australia's obligations under the UN CRPD in legislation and has transformed the nation, creating social and economic benefits while providing individual support to people with disability under the principle of choice and control. As to be expected with the rollout of any large-scale transformative government program, there have been some lessons learnt since the rollout of the NDIS. 12 years after its establishment, QAI advocates continue to live and breathe the intricacies of the NDIS every day and have identified a number of issues with the operations of the NDIS, which we believe present as the opportunities to improve the scheme. I will now outline three of the main challenges. Number one, gaps in how the NDIS interacts with other public services. Number two, access inequality. And number three, oversight. So gaps. The former Minister for the NDIS coined the term the only lifeboat in the ocean to describe the lack of supports for disabled people in the Australian community outside of the NDIS. If you have a disability but don't qualify for the NDIS, you are in the ocean. Despite good intentions, the creation of the NDIS has created an unintended segregation where other governments and community supports refuse to make changes to support a person with disability under the belief that that is the NDIS's responsibility to do so, or due to attempts between government services to cost shift. This means, firstly, that 90% of disabled people in Australia who don't qualify for the NDIS have no appropriate disability support. And secondary, those on the NDIS can fall through the gaps between the two service systems, each arguing with each other as to who is responsible for a service. People with disability, whether on the NDIS or not, still need accessible public services such as health, education and access to justice. This cost shifting can have dire consequences and people with disability fall through the cracks. While the NDIS has resulted in funding and supports that reduce institutionalisation risks for many people with disability, attempts at cost shifting and a lack of supports outside the NDIS risk creating other forms of institutionalisation and segregation for people with disability. We need to be constantly vigilant to ensure that the deinstitutionalisation guidelines of the UN CRPD are complied with. For example, children with disability are pushed into disability-specific programs paid for by the NDIS rather than mainstream programs with appropriate support. For those with very high support needs, decisions about funding force people with disability to pool their NDIS supports and live together in what could be considered a group home to try and make savings for the scheme. The dangers of institutionalisation for people with disability are well documented, and the NDIS should only ever support independence and choice. The reality of institutionalisation is that it does not save money, with recent research showing the NDIS could save $260 million over a 5-year period if 500 more people each year opted to live independently instead of in group homes. The inequity in the system and the poor interaction of the service systems combine to fail children with disability caught up in the criminal justice system. QAI advocates regularly visit our youth prisons and see shockingly disproportionate numbers of children with disability and Indigenous children locked up. For many of these children, they do not get access to the NDIS, or if they did, they live in parts of the community which are poorly serviced by NDIS services, for example, remote First Nations communities. The criminal justice system lacks appropriate disability supports, with NDIS supports often stopping at the prison gate. When incarcerated, children struggle to access existing NDIS disability supports or to find new ones. Over 70% of children in prison have disability, and over the past 3 years in Queensland, there has been a more than 2,000% increase in children whose disability means that they are not criminally responsible. Despite the irreparable harm caused by locking up children with disability without their NDIS supports, our Queensland State Government recently implemented adult crime, adult time laws. These laws mean children as young as 10 face adult sentences. Today, I echo the open letter of the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture and the Rights of Indigenous People, who said the approach of the Queensland Government was incompatible with basic child rights. Instead of listening to these experts, our state government has declared that the UN doesn't control them. Human rights must be the minimum standard that guide all governments here today. Access and equality. The complex bureaucratic system and the cost to obtain assessments and reports to access the NDIS create significant barriers for people with disabilities. People must be able to afford and advocate for themselves, or their family members are able to get the most out of the system. Whereas those with limited financial resources, lower education levels, Indigenous, culturally diverse communities, and those in remote rural locations face significant barriers to access the NDIS, and then once on the NDIS, navigating it appropriately and accessing services. Oversight. A third challenge is the monitoring and oversight of such a complex system, especially considering the profit motive for service providers. The NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission, established as a separate government body, is responsible for the quality and safety of NDIS supports and services. This includes physical and financial abuse of participants. The lack of accessible and responsive processes has resulted in many people being victims of service providers with bad intentions influenced by vested financial interests. For people in closed settings, non-verbal and with high support needs, this becomes even more concerning when there are insufficient measures in place to monitor these providers. Appropriate funding of oversight bodies, disability advocates and human rights lawyers from inception, and it is important to fund oversight bodies, disability advocates and human rights lawyers from inception and throughout the scheme is essential. One lesson from our experience is the importance of good review mechanisms built into the decision-making framework, including review to an external body. In particular, the government body should look to implement processes that focus on first-hand testimony from program participants. QAI has successfully supported participants through these review mechanisms who would have been forced to leave their home of many years due to inadequate funding to live with other participants and housing which could only be described as mini institutions. Sufficient supports should always be provided to people with disability seeking to challenge decisions about the NDIS, including lawyers and disability advocates. We have seen a number of recent changes aimed at cutting the costs of the NDIS. However, as Ellie rightly pointed out, the NDIS saves money and builds our economy, so attempts to cut costs should be avoided. Interaction with other public services, access inequality and oversight are three significant challenges we are facing 12 years down the track. Despite these challenges, the NDIS is still a world-leading program that has greatly improved the lives of Australians living with disability. The NDIS is certainly something every Australian should be proud of, and we at QAI are interested to hear more about South Korea's Personal Support Budget Plan for persons with disabilities being a key component of the government's broader disability policies aimed at enhancing the independence and community participation of individuals with disability. Perseverance is key, and so is consultation. The NDIS succeeded in Australia because disabled people and their families led the campaign and continue to drive changes. Any other country looking at setting up something similar must centre disabled voices from conception through to implementation and operation. Community consultation needs to happen before new policies are rolled out, especially when their impacts can be significant for the person with a disability and their families. To make this change, all political parties must be on board. Social transformation requires sustained political will across multiple election cycles. Enhancing the independence and community participation of individuals with a disability is a basic human right and should be above the political fray. Large-scale reform takes time. The rollout of such a significant government reform should be careful in order to learn, adapt and build capacity. The challenges described today are actively being discussed by people with disability and governments in Australia. To optimise the ability to evolve our NDIS, we need to keep learning, keep improving, and most of all, keep the CRPD at the core of the NDIS. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Kim Yeon Jung from, she is the team manager of international relations at Disabled People's International Korea. She has worked in the international disability field for about 5 years, focusing on the CRPD. Kim, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to speak today on behalf of Disabled People's International Korea. First of all, DPI Korea and QAI would like to express our sincere gratitude to the Permanent Mission of Republic of Korea to the United Nations for their support in making this side event possible. So we especially thank you for their commitment to facilitating this dialogue on such an important topic concerning disability policy issued in both countries. I am honored to join this important dialogue on inclusive financing on personal assistance to share the Korea's progress and challenges in transiting towards the person-centered support system. In Korea, the traditional model of disability support has been centered on the standardized services, often tied to institutional care, and providers determined service packages. This approach has severely limited to the anatomy and participation of persons with disabilities, particularly those with high support needs. However, in recent years, there has been a growing recognition, both among government officials and the disability community, that individualized right-based support is essential for realizing Article 19 of the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. In response, the Korean government has introduced the Personal Support Budget Plan, which aims to enable persons with disabilities to choose the direct service they need, when, how, by whom they are provided. This reform is still its early stages, but several pilot projects have been launched since 2022. The objective is to move away from fixed service blocks toward flexible and user-direct support based on the individual life goals and support needs. Despite this progress, there are several challenges remain. First, many service providers and local administrators are still unfamiliar with the personal-centered planning. A cultural and institutional shift is needed to support meaningful self-directions. Second, there are some concern about inequality in budget allocations, particularly for people with complex needs or limited informal support network. Third, Korea still lack of robust personal assistant workforce, especially rural areas, which limited the practical realization of choice and flexibility. In this regard, Australian National Disability Insurance schemes offers valuable lesson to us. We are particularly interested in how Australia has institutionalized the independent support coordination and built a mechanism to ensure the accountability and inequality in individual budgeting. As myself, working as an advocate in organization of persons with disability, I want to bring up to the voices of persons with disability living in Korea. So this is the quote of persons with disability. For a long time, disability services in Korea were something that happened to me, not something I could choose myself. I was told what kind of services I could receive, how many hours I could get, and who would provide it. There are very little rooms for my voices and my needs and my preferences. But since participating in this pilot project, the person with a personal support budget plan, something has changed. For the first time, I was asked, what kind of life do you want to live? Not just how much assistance I need with bathing or eating, but what my goals were, what was meaningful to me. With my personal budget, I could plan the support I need based on my daily rhythm. I could hire the personal assistants who truly understood me. I could adjust my support plan when my needs changed. This kind of flexibility gave me more than convenience. It gave me freedom. Of course, the system is not perfect. There are still many bureaucratic steps. Sometimes I'm worried about whether the budget will be enough or whether the support I need is even available in my area. But what matters the most is that I am no longer invisible in this system. I feel seen, heard, respect, not just as service recipient, but as a full human being with dreams, choices, and rights. I believe the personal support budget plan is not just a technical reform. It is a powerful step toward dignity, equality, and self-determination. And I hope that more people with disability in Korea and around the world can experience what I am beginning to experience now. Today, though today's exchange, we hope to deepen cooperation with international partners and to reinforce the vision that personalized support is not only service delivery model, but a matter of human rights and dignity. In closing, I would like to emphasize that implementing the person support budget plan in Korea is not merely a policy reform. It is the step toward transforming our support system into one that truly respects the will, preferences, and the rights of persons with disabilities. We look forward to working with many of you in this shared journey towards inclusive, sustainable, and right-based support system. Thank you very much.
Now, we're very lucky to have Rosemary Kays, Australia's Disability Discrimination Commissioner, here to speak to us. She serves as Vice Chair of the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and was instrumental in the drafting of the CRPD in 2004. Recognised with the Australian Human Rights Medal in 2019, Kays has dedicated her career to advancing disability rights, both nationally in Australia and internationally. Please welcome Rosemary Kays.
Thank you very much, Ellie, and I will correct her just to let everybody know I've stepped down from the Vice Chair and am now just a member of the committee, so I'm not so exalted anymore. So today's discussion has been quite insightful into the key innovations and developments that can be provided to create frameworks to enable people with disabilities live independently and be included in the community. So as other speakers have mentioned, Article 19, living independently and being included in the community, is a core article of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I would call it a linchpin article that draws all elements of the CRPD together to ensure people with disability have the necessary supports and infrastructure to be connected and to be an integral part of their community. So having frameworks in place so people with disability can choose the life they want to live and having supports in place to be able to do that. We've heard from the presentations by our friends from Korea and from our colleagues in Australia, that it's about marrying people to their goals and the supports that they need, rather than the supports that service providers provide. You're not attached to any particular service model or service type. It's an opportunity for people to express their individuality and to grow their individual life. So personal budgets can facilitate individual autonomy and allow people with disability to have greater choice and control over their lives. From the choice of individual service providers, and the choice of the people that provide personal supports, but also the types of supports that they require. But from what we've heard, we need also not to lose sight of the systemic. The NDIS and the developing Korean model of the individual budget system is very much focused on an individualised solution. They are individualised packages addressing the goals and dreams of individuals. But without the collective voice of people with disability, there are many gaps that can occur. So we cannot lose sight of the need for systemic advocacy in the drive for an individual model. It's incredibly important that the heterogeneity of the disability community is understood and their voice is heard. This makes it critical that the intersectional mechanisms within the CRPD are understood and applied in the overlays around individualised systems. So is there strong policy analysis and review from an intersectional point of view? What is the impact on women and girls with disability from the implementation of such individualised systems? What are the issues for First Nations people or people in rural and remote communities? What is the impact of those that have an engagement with the criminal justice system? Tom eloquently identified that those gaps can have very detrimental impacts on people with disability. So whilst individualised systems can and solve many service provision and support issues for individuals with disability, we need to be careful that the impact on various groups and that there is truly a uniform standard that is available for all people with disability. This also comes to market stewardship. It's very important that the nature and intent of the insurance model is understood. What is the role of creating a market of service provision for disability if the market is not responding, if there are markets that are too small and of not enough depth to be able to change and provide the services that are needed? How is that need going to be addressed? So, how is market stewardship being driven and how is it being monitored within an individualised system? So we can support individuals with disabilities, but programs focused on the benefit for individuals need to be balanced with policies and frameworks that drive systemic change in society. The NDIS and Korea's proposed individual budget system will create some systemic benefits and attitudinal change, but they cannot do it all alone. Broader systemic change needs also to be addressed, and this will in turn support the success of the NDIS and the individual budget system. So there needs to be drivers for employment that aren't just supply side. There needs also to be demand side, stewardship and development. The same with housing. We need to address the low expectations within community of the low expectations of people with disability. And their right to live within the community and independently if they so desire. So housing needs to be a critical element. That housing shouldn't be seen as something separate because it has to be accessible. It needs to be seen as a core element of the needs for human variation. We will all experience disability at some point in our lives. Our housing should reflect this reality. This should be the same for transport. Public transport should be something we can all access, including when it's in the sky. Okay, recent experiences may be influencing what I'm saying. But anyway, but we shouldn't also just focus on those publicly structured systems. We must also think about what the private market and the role they play. We need to be careful not to financially incentivise the segregation of people with disability again. If you provide government funds for a private sector development, the opportunity for oligarchic behaviour must be recognised and addressed. And so we must be careful and see the benefits and the promise of individual mechanisms, but we need to see it in the much broader collective need. It's been a powerful presentation from all four speakers, and I believe that individualised and personalised responses to disability are the only way we can help develop the individual spirit. But we need to be careful that we don't leave the individual to themselves and create vulnerability, because people with disability have been assumed to be vulnerable all their lives. Let's not create more vulnerability by providing them with individualised supports. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion and that the Q&A allows us to be able to take this opportunity to find out more and to seek more information. Thank you.
As Rosemary just alluded to, we have time for a Q&A right now. So no one can be shy. We're at the United Nations. So please, questions, comments. Yes.
Thank you very much. Carlos Rios from Human Rights Watch. And I was wondering if the panelists could give us their views on how to include the issue of disability support services in the current care economy discussion. care systems are being put in place in the Americas and other places. And I'm wondering if you have some recommendations on this issue, and if you see it as an opportunity to influence that system. Thank you.
Well, in Australia, the NDIS has, revolutionised our economy. Over the last year, 1 in 3 jobs created in the Australian economy have been directly linked to the NDIS. So this is not just social reform, this is economic reform. And as I stated in my speech, for every dollar invested, there's a $2.25 return to the economy. I find it really interesting when people only think about investing in people with disability as welfare. It's not. It's actually good economic sense. My NDIS plan isn't just money wasted. It's actually money spent hiring people to support me, money spent on businesses that create wheelchairs, that create products. I think there's been a kind of shift in the way that we think about disability support, and like it being rather than a burden on taxpayers, it's actually creating a new economy in Australia. But that, also has to come with oversight, as Tom alluded to. We have to make sure people with disability are protected from those who just want to make a quick profit and make money off them. And, we haven't done that perfectly by far. And the system has played catch up in making sure disabled people are protected. I think, disabled people need a lot more consumer advocacy in the market, and that's something that's been missing.
Thanks, Ellie. Yeah, and just to second Ellie's point, when it does come to oversight, I do think it... Oh, sorry, how do I... Is this
it's
on
on
now?
now.
It's on? No worries. Thanks very much, Ellie. And just to second Ellie's point regarding oversight, I do think it is really important to have sufficient oversight mechanisms in place. And I think that is perhaps one of the biggest lessons that Australia has learned over the past 12 years, is to make sure that participants are protected by service providers with bad influences that have vested financial interests. And so I think inevitably any large transformative government insurance scheme will attract certain parties that are motivated purely by profit. And that's, I'd say, an inevitability in any free market scheme. But it is essential that any government oversight body not only has the resources to appropriately monitor the possible exploitation of participants, but also have the legislative powers to enforce penalties upon exploitative service providers.
Ellie, can I just make a comment
Yeah,
as well?
of course.
Hi, Carlos. It's good to see you. I'd just like to pick up on the point that you were making about the current UN focus on the care economy. And I think the critical thing here is what Ellie was just talking about, is that there's a disconnect in the language and the terminology and the focus that's happening within the discussion around the care economy. People with disability are still being seen as passive recipients of care. And we need to change that discourse and language. And we need to be able to be able to identify, as Ellie said, that people with disability are purchasers of care. Now that's fine in developed countries where there are personalised budgets and there is market stewardship and people with disabilities have greater autonomy in the care economy. But we also need to make sure that people with disability are not seen as passive recipients of care, and that the care economy is analysed in a much more richer way that gives people with disability a lot more voice in that, that people with disabilities are understood as partners in that process and not just as passive recipients.
Sorry, I'm not sure how to use the... Oh, hi, I'm Kimia Randall. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was very informative. I just have a question. I'm sorry, I'm not sure of your name, to the lady yourself. You mentioned that there was a cost return per dollar spent through the NDIS. We walked in a bit late, so I'm not sure if we missed that information. I was wondering when that figure was collated, and I think more importantly, just briefly, a discussion, I guess, in terms of how is that figure come to? What factors are considered? Is it a cost of less hospitalisation, say for less institutionalisation? So how that cost benefit analysis is reached?
Yeah, so that was a 2021 piece of research by Per Capita, which found for every dollar invested in the NDIS, there's a $2.25 return. And I think it's things like employment of support workers and like investment in new businesses that have started up, and like the money actually is reinvested in the local economy, into products, into people, into people with disability go back to work, their carers go back to work. Like there is an actual financial benefit in economic participation of people with disability. So there's a range of factors there. I can't speak to all of them from Per Capita, I'm sorry, but like we know that the NDIS creates so many jobs, and that piece of research was funded just before the last federal election, and was very powerful in a campaign that was run by disabled people. Yeah.
I'm Isabel Hodge. I'm from the United States International Council on Disabilities. Back in 2011, I conducted a survey, an analysis of over 4,000 public comments from people across the United States. Some of them were parents, some of them were individuals who lived in institutions and were able to live in the community through home and community-based services waivers. And then some of them came from the provider community, and they really had a strong voice. You could really tell that they were united because they were using the same language in their comments that they submitted. But we did receive a lot of pressure from those groups because they didn't want to deinstitutionalize. They wanted to keep the business. But we also saw a lot of fraud, and we continue to see a lot of fraud in through the waiver system, whether it's self-directed or whether it's agency-directed. We still see a lot of fraud where providers are reporting that they're providing a lot more hours than they actually are. So oversight is very important. And I would just leave you with the United States publishes a report, I think it's every 2 years, called the State of the States. And it really shows people, or shows the government and other interested parties, that it is cost effective to serve people with disabilities in their homes through the waivers. and that deinstitutionalization is the way to go. And, you know, as I travel from, you know, country to country, they always want to learn about that report. And if you just Google it, it will come up and you'll see that the data supports that people with disabilities should be living in the community. And I would encourage you to do something similar for your counties, your prefectures, in your countries, to show and continually show your leadership that this is beneficial for all. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to say there has been like a narrative around the NDIS and fraud, and I think it's quite unhelpful because, to be honest with you, yes, there is fraud in the system. Yes, it should be cracked down. Yes, there should be oversight. Yes, you know, no one wants fraud. Like, I don't want any money taken away from disabled people that shouldn't be. But when you look at the actual percentage that is fraudulent, it's about the same percentages in any other government program. You know, fraud exists where government money is handed out, no matter which program you're looking at. So fraud isn't any higher in the NDIS than it is in any other, in Medicare or any other kind of government program. But for some reason, the focus on fraud in the NDIS is a lot harsher. And, you know, get rid of the fraudsters, get rid of the people who are trying to take advantage of people with disability, but don't claim that there's fundamentally something wrong about giving money to disabled people. And there is an underlying kind of message there that, like, oh, it's a bit risky giving money to disabled people. They could be taken advantage of. And I think that's a little bit ableist, to be frank with you. And it happens more in the discussion around the NDIS than it does any other government service. Yeah. And then Catherine.
Thank you, Ellie. Grant Lindsay, Australian Federation of Disability Organisations. And first, I'd just like to endorse Ellie's last comments. And coming from the US, you'd be well aware of defence programs paying $1,000 for a hammer. So that sort of fraud is endemic, as Ellie has said, in all large government programs in all countries around the world. And yeah, and so did I. So my question is actually for our DPI colleagues. The NDIS scheme, when it was envisaged, was supposed to be a part of a three-tiered approach, and where and the NDIS, as Ellie has said, covers approximately 740,000 people out of 20% of the Australian population, which is nearly 5 million. So there's a huge number of people with disabilities who are not covered by the NDIS scheme itself. And as Tom has indicated, the gap was in the implementation of the NDIS, because we're a federated system of governance, states and territories saw the opportunity to drop the ball and pass the buck to the Commonwealth NDIS scheme, and therefore it became their problem and dropped their funding. So what level, so my first question is your scheme intended to cover all people with disability, or is there a categorisation of people who will receive funding? I do appreciate there'll be a level of difference depending on the nature of disability of full funding received, because it is a personalised package system. My second question is with regard to political governance, if you like. Who holds responsibility at your government level for the scheme and for people with disability? Is there a single minister with control, one or two ministers with control, or like in Australia, we've got 3 ministers with fingers in the NDIS pie at different levels, and a number of other ministers who have responsibilities for everything else? So I'd be very interested in your response.
Yeah, more correct answer using, my translator. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Is this on? Yeah, thanks. Okay, so 이제 두 가지 질문을 하셨는데요. 일단은 이제 호주의 경우에는 이제 세 가지의 이제 티어로 이제 구성을 해서 이제 한 74만 명에 달하는 이제 분들을 여기에서 이제 커버를 하고 있는데 상당히 이제 숫자가 많은 편이지 않습니까? 근데 이제 지방에서 그것이 이제 제도가 된 후에는 자기네들이 지자체들이 이제 쓰는 비용을 이제 국가로 이제 전가하는 그런 경향들이 이제 나타나기 시작했다. 그래가지고 이제 한국에 대해서 이제 사례를 여쭤보자면은 이제 이것이 모든 장애인들한테 이제 적용이 되고 있으신지 그런 것을 이제 우선 알고 싶다고 말씀하셨고, 그다음에 이제 정부 차원에서 이제 정치적으로는 이제 어떤 사람들이 이거를 최종적인 권한을 갖고 이거를 실행을 하고 있는지, 예를 들어서 이제 뭐 어느 부처의 장관이 한 명이 이거를 관장을 하고 있는지, 아니면은 이제 뭐 호주에서처럼 뭐 세 개 부처가 같은 비슷한 권한을 행사를 하면서 이제 협조를 하고 있는 상황인지, 이제 그런 것들을 좀 설명을 해주시면 고맙겠습니다.
네, 감사합니다. 먼저 호주의 NDIS와 한국형 개인 예산제에는 가장 큰 차이점이 있습니다. 간단하게 말씀을 드리면 제도적인 기반과 운영의 범위가 좀 다르다는 것입니다. 호주의 NDIS는 장애에 관련된 모든 서비스를 통합한 전국 단일 시스템으로 운영이 되고 있으며 예산 규모와 서비스의 선택 범위가 매우 넓습니다. 반면 한국은 현재 활동 지원 서비스, 돌봄 서비스, 장기 요양 서비스 등이 병행되고 있어서 점진적으로 서비스 간의 연계 및 통합을 통해서 개인 예산제를 정착시키는 방식으로 진행이 되고 있습니다. 즉 한국형 모델은 단계적인 통합과 지역 맞춤형 설계가 특징입니다.
So while the NDIS in Australia is a nationalized system where it covers basically the entire population, in Korea the key differences would be one would be there would be right now as it stands it's being incrementally implemented in phases. And the second difference would be that it is kind of tailored toward the different provincial entities at this time.
그리고 제가 정부의 내용을 정확히는 알지 못하나 한국에서는 보건복지부 단독으로 이 예산이나 이런 부분들 집행에 대한 세부 사항들을 기획을 하고 있는 걸로 알고 있고요. 지방 정부에서의 어떤 예산 부분도 중앙 정부와의 협조를 해서 일부 중앙 정부에서 예산을 내려주는 것으로 기획되고 있는 것으로 알고 있습니다.
So I am not at this time entirely familiar with how this is being planned and coordinated by the central government, by the Ministry of Health and Welfare. But my understanding is that the central government, the ministry, formulates a budget and then hands down the budget to the local provincial authorities.
네, 게다가 한국 같은 경우는 중증 장애인을 먼저 대상으로 서비스 테스트를 하고 있고 호주에서도 일부 논의가 되고 있는 것으로 알고 있는데 노인 그 요양 서비스, 요 노인에 대한 부분을 아직 우리 제도에서는 충분히 담고 있지 못한 현실에 있습니다.
So right now the implementation has been focused on severe cases of disability because these are pilot programs at this time, and unfortunately, as it stands, we have not been able to fully address the elderly at this time because of our focus on the severity of the disability. 그러니까 이제
지방 분권화 지방에서 이제 갖고 있는 수치를 우리 중앙 정부하고 얘기를 해서 충분한 논의를 해서 중앙 정부의 예산이 일부 편성되는 것으로 알고 있습니다.
So how it's being conducted now is the provincial authorities would gather their own data and have a collective report to the central government, where after which the central government by the minister would set a budget and then administer that budget down to the provincial authorities.
Do you want?
I'm Catherine McAlpine. I'm the CEO of Inclusion Australia, and we're the national voice for people with an intellectual disability and their families. I just wanted to comment on the importance of oversight and of also innovative quality oversight, quality mechanisms. At the moment, there's a program in Victoria where people with an intellectual disability are trained to go into group homes and to talk to people about the quality of the service. And we're waiting on the final evaluation, but what we're seeing is that the peer-to-peer support in terms of the reporting that people with an intellectual disability will do directly to their peers is substantially more than what they do even talking to advocates or other people. And so this is a real, the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission is now has funded a pilot Australia-wide, well, it's still in Victoria, but as a national pilot to keep working on this, to really work on how it does all the things. It employs people with an intellectual disability in the system, but it also is hopefully going to be a key oversight and quality mechanism, safeguarding mechanism for people in group homes where they can talk about their experiences to people that they trust.
Thank you for that. I think we've run out of time now, so thank you for everyone's contributions and thank you for being part of this important conversation. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.